fun. I'm your host, Paul Sanneman. I'm founder of Contractor Staffing Source. We have a contractors build great teams. My guest today is Mark Eastman from Solution Building. Now, if you're really old, you may Eastman Kodak, which is a film. That's when they actually had film way back when, right? So, Mark, tell me about Solution Building, what you guys do, and how you got started, and why people should listen to you.
Okay. I started doing construction 40 plus years ago, right out of high school, was working. I grew up on a farm, so I was working in the winter time doing construction, and then farming in the summers. And that was kind of, I figured I'd farm my whole life until things got switched up. And my dad died at 50 and kind of changed the plans. So I moved into construction full time and kind of was working for myself most of that time and just trying to figure things out. It's one of those things where, growing up on the farm, you kind of had to figure out things and how to do them. And so that kind of played right into that and was going along doing construction, but son of a gun wasn't making any money and, just struggling and trying to figure out how to do the business part of it. And so, kind of continued on, finally got to a point where I just figured that was life. That's what I had and was gonna just accept that and go on. Well, I began to figure out some of the answers and struggle and looking for different programs online to help me with proposals or how to put money back. And you get surprised when you're self-employed and you get a bill from the accountant for the income tax, that's self-employment tax, and you're like, don't have that money. How am I going to come up with that? And those kinds of things continue to come up. And so I began to kind of figuring out some of the ways and systems and processes to be able to control those things better. And things were going along, relatively well, but still kind of in that, just trying to figure it out. Then in 2012, I had a scaffold plank break and ended up falling and having a concussion and in the hospital. And in that recovery, kind of began to ask myself, well, what would I do if I couldn't do construction? What would if I wasn't able to get out and go? And I know over the years, there were a lot of different contractors that I worked with and subs and so on that would ask me where I'd come up with my proposal system and different things like that. And I began to think, well, these guys need that too. So maybe I could, help them, if I wasn't able to do construction. And thankfully, I'm still able to do construction. But then we kind of begin to thinking about all those different problems and so on. And so then I began to thinking about coaching and consulting and working with contractors and helping them figure out ways to do those issues, get over those issues that I dealt with and so on. And so consequently, now for the last, we've been actively working toward being more coaching and consulting. We're still doing construction, but we're just really getting that up and going right now. And the last few years been working on that. And we've kind of come up with what we're, a business building program. And we use the BUILD as an acronym. That is being aware, understanding, intentional action, learning, and then the dream. And that's kind of the way it goes. That's kind of the process I went through. But it ultimately comes down to that intentional action. You've got to do something or nothing changes. We can continue to do the same old things, but nothing will change if we
now, Mark, there's a lot of coaching companies. What do you meet with them weekly? Do you give them a toolkit? How do you get them to change their behavior from a craftsman to an entrepreneur? Because that's a tough shift to make.
That is terribly tough. And that's one of the things we're consistently working on. We've got a digital toolbox online that's available to people. It's pretty inexpensive and it gets new stuff updated to it. And that was our initial thought, was that we would just, make that available. Well, several people bought it, but then in follow-up, they just weren't using it. They weren't implementing it. So what we have shifted now into is more of an active weekly meeting program where we can implement different things specific to them. Working with a guy now that started out, he won a drawing that we did that was for a proposal system that was built specifically for him. And then that's turned now into that weekly meeting, and we're continuing to implement new things as we figure out exactly what he needs. Because I think that's one of the problems is, those one size fits all magic bullet things out there. People will buy those and they get them, and then they either don't understand them, or they aren't able to implement them, or they're take too much time, or it doesn't fit their needs, and so they consequently end up in
But
just
it's sort of like, Mark, the ticket to the gym does not get you in shape.
right. Exactly. You got to pick up the weights, you got to do the exercises, you got to take the action.
Right.
So that's kind of where we're at, is to try and figure out ways and implement things that are specific to individuals, because that's the other thing, is every company out there is doing things a little different. They have a little different need. They have just whatever that is. And like this one that I was talking about a while ago, I mean, he told me the other day, he said, it's amazing the turnaround that we've seen in and it was just a matter of them not knowing where their money was getting spent and how they were losing money. We've implemented
Well, Mark, can you give me a specific example that's just for the audience of a company that you've worked with? You don't have to give the name if you want to, and what they did and how you intervened and what the outcome has been.
Well, and that's where this one that I'm working with right now would be probably the best example, because like I say, we're just really getting started with this as far as the working one-on-one with these guys. And he has, I mean, and I don't have his specific numbers, but I know he has told me that the turnaround was, significant. And I know that, it's that matter of showing up every day and doing the things that he was doing, but he just didn't have a feel. He didn't know what their labor costs were. He didn't have any way to track that. He was disorganized. We've implemented different ways to help them organize. We use OneNote a lot, and did a lot of training on that with him. And he said that's made a huge difference. He's now incorporated his wife in to help him do bookkeeping and keep track of that kind of thing. He's a mason and foundation floor leveler is what their business is. And it's that turnaround that he's seeing that's
Well, Mark, I have a recommendation for people listening to this podcast, and that is I've been a business coach for God knows 50 years, a long time. And I
right.
think finding a coach is sort of like finding a wife. I mean, maybe an analogy, but you
Yeah.
got to talk to a couple. I mean, because every coach has their own style. Some are big companies,
Sure.
very corporate. Some are two guys in a truck, and they're very personal. So to me, if you're looking for a business coach, I would interview several, and find out who you
Mhm.
like, who you relate to, who you're going to listen to. That's the big one, who you
Right.
respect.
Right.
Because there's, basically you get everything you want to know for free on the internet, but that doesn't work because people don't do it, right?
Right.
So to
Right.
me, well, I'm going to give you a question, Mark. Who's your ideal client, Mark? If somebody's listening to this podcast and they want to connect with you, I mean, who would your ideal client be?
Well, and it would be that small to medium-sized construction company. It could be a single electrician, on up to, I mean, it could be as big as, but most of them, when they get big, they have figured out, they've either gotten big enough, they've figured it out, or they make enough money that they can absorb the
The
losses
losses, right?
haven't. Yeah. But so that small to medium-sized construction
You're going to
company,
say somewhere between 2 and 20 employees, right? Something like that.
yeah, or even between 1 and I would say 1 to 50 probably, but
Okay, cool.
more of them are going to be in that 20 probably.
Okay. And then what do you like to see in a client? What makes a person like, I really want to work with that guy?
If they've got the desire to change, if they want to turn things around, and they are frustrated with that place that they are stuck in and they don't know how to get out of it, they've got to be willing to do something. That's the key to all of this. It's got to be somebody that is willing to make that change. and put in the time to build the business rather than just construction projects.
I mean, to me, I mean, Coach Mears, the hardest part is, I believe in the be, do, have. Be is what you're, thinking, doing is doing stuff, and having stuff. You've got to start with who you are, right, to change things.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the best person to meet always, coach, is somebody who actually would listen, right?
Yeah.
And if I said call an architect, he actually called an architect versus having an excuse of why he didn't call an architect or whatever I was asking him to do.
Right.
So I think somebody who likes you and you like them and sees value in what you do and will listen.
Right.
You probably found out, I found this in coaching, Mark, is that when I do stuff for free, people don't listen. I mean, I've coached my friends forever. And they still don't listen to me. Well, it's like if you have at the gym, somehow if you pay for a personal trainer, you're more likely to do the exercise than if you just show up. You know that?
Right. Right. Yeah. And because and it comes down to that choice. It's that I say this a lot, that we all have that superpower of choice. We can choose what we're going to do. And until we choose to make that change and to do something different, your business is going to be like it's always been, and you're not going to,
And fortunately, in my years of coaching, the biggest motivator is pain. I wish it was different, but if they're in survival, they stay surviving. But if all of a sudden they lose a bunch of money or somebody sues them or they can't find whatever, they're motivated. I mean, it'd be nice if people are motivated by love versus fear. But in coaching, most of the people called me when I was a coach because they were tired of doing what they're doing. They're just sick of it. I've been doing this for 5 years or 5 months or 10 years. I'm making the same amount of money. I'm working harder and I'm just frustrated. It's not going anywhere. And I will tell people listening to this podcast, it's definitely you. I mean, it's not our market. It's not the environment. It's not the economy. All those things, you can succeed in any economy, any business, any marketing, if you are willing to make the change. So clearly, I think the first thing is you have to admit that you're the problem, right?
Right. Right. Well, yeah, and it is just such I see this a lot. They learned the construction. They know how to build a building. And I tell them it's the same kind of thing, but you've got to shift that in build your business. So you've got to have, you got to need a blueprint. You need a plan to build that building. You need to know what it is you're wanting to build. And then you've got to start out with a good solid foundation, and then you can build on that. That's not to say you can't make remodels as you go along. But it's just that matter of you've got to have that same kind of thing. And I think that most of them think in that physical building. If I want to I just need to go swing a hammer and I'll get it put together. Well, it's the same thing for business, but it's a different kind of hammer. And you've got to, you've got to figure that out.
So I got a question, Mark. How did you make that transition from craftsman to entrepreneur? I mean, I guess ending up in the hospital probably helped, but
well, it did, but I think it began before that, and I think it was just a matter of well, I was in a partnership years ago, and we hired a consulting firm to come in and help us with our business. I say my partner hired them, and we paid a pretty good chunk of money out of pocket to have them come in and do that, and they built these systems and so on. And then what happened was I began to implement those things, and my partner didn't, and it wasn't working. And it's like, okay, we've spent this money, we need to be doing something with it. And I began to then working through that and developing my own processes and, like I say, systems there and so on, and it worked, and I could see it, and it was consistent. And so that's the thing, that you could begin to see some of that turnaround then. And like I say, so yeah, just that's a big part of that.
Well, what different? I mean, there's a bunch of consulting firms out there, right? There's a ton of them, right? So what differentiates you from all the other coaches out there that you think makes you different or better or than the other coaching companies?
And of course, I don't know a lot of them, so I don't know, but I would say the thing that am looking at is that individuality of the company. I think, excuse me, rather than trying to have that one size fits all for every company to go, okay, like that consulting firm I was talking about that we hired, they came in and they put all these things into place based on what their experience was, but didn't really fit what we were necessarily trying to do. I'm looking at it from that perspective now. What is it that you as an individual in your company, what are your struggles? What is it you're trying to overcome? What is your biggest, and starting with those issues first and making it individual to them.
I would say that you're more custom because, and I would say they actually get to work with you, right? Versus somebody else.
Yep. At this point, that's all there is.
Companies are big, they have lots of employees, but it's a different kind of model. So they actually get to work with you, which is good. So I would say if you're listening to this podcast and you like Mark, at least he appeals to you and there's something that rings like, that seems like a guy to talk to. How do they get in touch with you, Mark?
Well, and we are just finishing up our landing page website, which I don't have that link in front of me, but I could get that to you and we can, if you can put it in the show notes. And they can always email me at mark@timbercreekconstruction.us, and that is all spelled out. The Timber Creek Construction is all spelled out. We've got social media. We've got, you can find us on Solution Building.
And they can go to your website. So what if they go to Solution Building,
.net,
/Shales, and they go to Solution Building and they go to get your toolbox. What does that do?
That will take them to the toolbox that they can then purchase that. And they can, and if they have, like I say, there's a place on there where they can contact me and set up a meeting if they want to as well.
Great. And what does your toolbox cost? I'm trying to look at it on the website here.
It is $39 a month or $297 a year. And that's just that's a subscription base, and we're adding tools periodically. We just finished building a tool for this contractor I was talking about, a labor tracking spreadsheet that we'll be adding to the tool. So that will be, and it just, as those go in, they get them automatically. That will be.
So if you're looking for a toolbox to build a business with, this is it, right?
Yep.
And that's almost, I consider that almost free. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Great. So my suggestion, if you're listening to this podcast, you like Mark and you don't want like the corporate kind of approach to your business. You'd like a one-on-one with a guy that you can like talk to every day and you know the guy. I think Mark would be a great choice. So before you choose your next, if you want to choose a coach, I would talk to 2 or 3 and definitely include Mark on that list because I think he's a great guy. So thanks, Mark. I appreciate being here.
You bet. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you having me.